So today we have the big honor and opportunity to meet and discuss with Karen Tse. So Karen Tse can be described as being a human rights defender and social entrepreneur. After her studies in the US, she started her career in the law before moving to Cambodia to train the country's first core group of public defenders, while subsequently working as the judicial mentor for the UN Center for Human Rights in Cambodia. In 2000, she founded International Bridges to Justice, based in Geneva, which is a nonprofit organization aiming at eradicating torture in the 21st century and protect rights of accused people around the world. Generally, their aim is to implement groundbreaking measures in judicial reform in developing nations, both on the level of the individual, but also on the system-wide level. And additionally, Karen has been recognized as one of America's best leaders by US News World Report and has been invited to speak on many different occasions across the world. So we're very excited and grateful to be able to speak to you today. And we thank you already for according us some of your precious time. We already had the opportunity to get to know you a bit better before the recording. So we're very looking forward to your perspectives and asking you more questions. So
Great.
welcome on this living curriculum.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the first aspect we were a bit more curious about was this whole situation that's going on right now, this kind of global crisis, which is Corona crisis, but also the climate crisis, which we all face. And we wanted to know from your side how, for example, how do you see this current crisis to serve as an evolutionary opportunity to kind of go in the direction of the world that you've been working towards?
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to meet not only both of you, but everybody else. I think it's a really interesting time. A lot of people have described this as like the Great Reset in terms of, what is possible. And I think that's definitely true for me and the organization, even just in terms of like the daily things, right? We definitely it's like it can be described in many ways, but it can also be described in a way as a sacred time of stopping everything and really having the time and the space around us to just be and move and act in a different way. And I see that also for our organization, that there's a couple of things going on. One is that because it's broken the pattern of daily life, that we're able to, really recreate and look at things critically and say, where can we expand, where can we contract, and what do we need to do? It's a particularly interesting time for us. Many people see COVID-19 as a health crisis. It's also very much a justice crisis, because what International Bridges of Justice does is we work to give people a lawyer early on so that we can prevent torture and also protect people's due process rights. And right now, when you hear about, when people talk about state of emergency, it's always a very difficult thing, because that is a time where a lot of individual due process rights are often stopped in the name of security, and in this case, in the name of health. And it's a time and place where there is the opportunity for a lot of due process violations, and also opportunities for corruption in terms of people, stopping people asking people for a bribe in order not to be arrested, in order not to be tortured, in order to get a court date and whatnot. So in some ways, it's a COVID-19 is a justice crisis. And at the same time, there is a real opportunity. There's an opportunity in the technology, because we're all using technology in different ways. But there's also the opportunity to rebuild the system in a way that's global and systematic. And it's funny, because there have been so many times where, for example, we had a board meeting, a Swiss Council meeting, and the board members were laughing, and they said, "Oh my gosh, it took COVID-19 for us to all meet on Zoom." Because there were a couple of board members who kept saying, "We should do Zoom." We started it 20 years ago, so I started on the phone. So we just kept being on the phone, and we never saw each other. And then all of a sudden COVID-19, we saw each other physically in person. But when we brought everyone together, they were like, "Oh my gosh, wow, so easy." We could just hit this button, Zoom, and we can see each other. So we see that there's, there's differences in the opportunities for technology, which we've always known would supercharge us into the next level with access to justice and building, really a home, a virtual home for us in that way. And so oddly, COVID-19, which is a crisis, is also forcing us in a good way into using technology for the betterment of really our mission and our hope.
That's great, and I completely agree with that. And also maybe based on your life journey or the different perspectives and experiences that you've had in your wonderful career so far, how do you have an example of a time where you faced a crisis, maybe not the same one as we have now, but another crisis where you found a breakthrough through this breakdown, let's say? And could you describe us maybe how you did that, or how you kind of made this way through?
Well, it's funny because, as soon as you said that, can you describe another crisis? I realized again in some funny way that the solution was very similar to where we are facing now, which is technology. So there've been a number of, I guess there's been a number of sort of crisis points for many different reasons. But one that I think of is that there was a certain point, and this is a number of years ago, where we went through an absolute financial crisis. So there's a financial crisis in the world. And this also means that there's also a financial crisis for many non-governmentals or NGOs moving forward. And I remember that there was a point where it was a complete financial crisis for us. And we were just completely like, wow, what are we going to do? Because we have defenders all throughout the world who are defending people who are, arrested, imprisoned, or, really at risk. And I remember that, at a certain point, we were going and we were thinking we had to close down certain offices, but what was miraculous, and this was the opportunity, is that number one, I went to a number of offices. I'll pick one that I always talk about because I love this one particular woman who said, "Stop it, Karen." But I went to her and I said, "Hey, this is in Burundi. Aline, your salary went from 1,000 to 500 to what now? Now we have to close down. So I'm really sorry, but the work is amazing and you are saving lives, but we can't support you anymore and you have to do something else." And she took my hand and she said, "Karen, I don't think you realize this, but our commitment is greater than the budget and we will keep on, keep on, keep on." And during that time, which was a huge financial crisis for our organization, none of the offices closed. And we stopped having budget for a lot of them. And they found different ways of doing it in broom closets, or like, we can work here. We don't actually need an office. They found different partnerships. They were super innovative and resourceful in terms of how they kept going on a country by country level. And for us as a head office, we began to use technology more and more because we couldn't fly there. So we were using technology, doing different calls, connecting in different ways. And so it was really interesting because when we actually came out of that quote unquote financial crisis, we had already implemented different things and different ways of being, which really expanded our ability to accomplish the mission. So that was interesting. And I think it's similar to today, where we're also discovering different things that we could be doing through technology. And I think that this is going to also catapult us into the next level.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And also now the common theme of this Corona crisis is home. And we're meeting you at your home in Geneva. And one of the things that we really were curious about was what home means for you, how you would define your home, and what role did it play in your, let's say, transformative journey and career.
Okay, great. So I'm super excited because I get to show you one of my favorite rocks in the whole world. So here is one of my rocks at my home. Here. See, do you see that rock?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in my home. That for me is a physical representation of just stability and strength, and it gives me stability and it gives me strength in a lot of ways. It's, for me, that's just something that is very, very rooted, and I would say that's really home for me. that I see home being just a whole range of things. There's home in myself. There's home in the community that we have for International Bridges of Justice, which is like a virtual home sometimes because people are from Syria to Burundi to Myanmar to, all countries of the world. And then, there's the home of my own family, right, where I live. And, just in terms of my own background, I really come from sort of a cross of two different things, which is that I was trained as a lawyer. I worked as a public defender. And then I lived in Cambodia. I lived in Cambodia for 3 years, where that was really the foundation of International Bridges of Justice in terms of seeing people who, had stolen small things and were arrested and didn't have a lawyer. But then after that, I went to divinity school. So I went to divinity school for 3 years. And for me, it's both parts, right? The legal part was, very, the legal part is much more like sort of linear, not academic, but very linear in terms of physically being outside in the world, what you do, and sort of concrete ways of realizing the actions that you take. And for me, has to be very connected to home. And for me, home is also in your heart, right? Home is also your values. Home is returning to that deeper part of, what you know to be true, and the motivation of why what you do, and the ability to be resilient, because some things work in that logical linear world as you're doing things, and sometimes things don't quote unquote work immediately. So for me, home is really the base that we come back to from where we work. And I feel really grateful. I feel really grateful because I've got home. I've got home in myself, which is super important. I've got home with my family. That's super important. And I have home in the community of International Bridges of Justice, which is, where we are all really willing and able to work together. And then we've got home with like the larger global community, which includes your Home for Humanity. I mean, which includes the fact that, we've got greater supporters and greater people on this journey, all who say, hey, we have different gifts to contribute, but we'll contribute the gift that we have. So this is home and global home for me.
There was a beautiful transition to actually the next part that I wanted to touch upon, which was Home for Humanity,
Okay.
which I just wanted to ask you, or we were curious to know from your visits, different visits at Home for Humanity, what kind of experience or moments struck you the most, or how did that Home for Humanity kind of act as a catalyst for your own activities and your own kind of personal journey?
Great. I think, the three things are that you always feel is when you go and just step into this magical place, is you feel love and openness and acceptance. And these I feel are they're really the fuel, right? It's like being refueled for being able to do what you need to do, which is, I think, for a lot of us, we have very physical and strong actions in the world, and at the same time, you need some sense of fuel. So I also love that sort of sense of openness and wonder and ability to create, and that is always a sense that you have. you have this this sense that you can create whatever you need to create there. And I remember that at a certain time we were asking, we needed to figure out ways that we could also have a home for International Bridges to Justice in France. And I approached Home for Humanity and said, what do you think? Can we do this? And part of it is that. Part of it was just, they said, let us think about it for about 25 seconds. And then they said, yes, this is great. This is International Bridges of Justice is something that we're very committed to. And this is Home for Humanity. It's part of humanity, a greater humanity. And if we can do this one, they said it was a small thing, but it wasn't a small thing for us. They said, if we can do this one small thing, we would love to do it and to do what we can. And I think that's part of the specialness of it, is that there's an openness, and then there's a magic that happens when there's, you know, love and an openness, and you just feel that a sense of I want to say non-judgment, but non-judgment sounds strange because it's not like the positive, but that's the essence of what I mean. That there's an essence of affirmation at your core being, and there is a sense that, you know, everybody who walks into Home for Humanity has a contribution to make to this world. And, you know, we all do. I think we're all born into this heroic journey, and we have a contribution to make. And that's the sense, that's the magical sense that I feel. And with that, I know that when we're all contributing the one thing that we can contribute, that we just make this an incredible place. So that's the magic that I feel.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I think with all these great insights, we came at the end of this kind of opening statement.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask maybe to Stephanie if she would have maybe more specific questions or other things she wanted to rebound on from what she said.
Yes, especially in connection to the current crisis and this. We told you before, for us it's actually more of an opportunity, it didn't really much change for me, but for you it's definitely different. And I was just wondering, how did you, in this time or in other times of crisis, did you recenter, or did you reconnect with your inner values, integrity, and what are your tips or advice on that?
Okay, great. Well, I think that I'm really lucky because I live on the edge of a forest. And I think that it was not always, you know, being in isolation and being in lockdown, I think is easy for some people, harder for others. And for me, it's been sometimes easy and sometimes not as easy. And one of the things that's been great for me is that I can go outside to a tree somewhere in the forest. And I think there's something about that. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, it's a strange time, because on the one hand, everything is slowed down, and on the other hand, you feel a need for everything to be sped up. I don't know what that is, but there's like an interesting tension of everything. So I think for me, it's being able to just go outside and be next to a tree. And, you know, maybe everyone doesn't have a forest, but if you can find a tree, I think a tree is a fantastic thing. And I think that if you can find a candle and just, you know, watch the candle and breathe in whatever you need to breathe in, whether it's love or hope or faith, and then just breathe out whatever you want to breathe out. And I think during this time of the coronavirus, a lot of it is fear. So it's health fear, but sometimes that becomes a negative energy that hits a fear for everything else. So just breathe in love and breathe out fear. And yeah, and then it's great to see your smiling faces.
Well, thank you. And it's so interesting also to see the candle behind, and the tree of life as well. You even have the tree at your home. That's nice.
That's true. I didn't think about that. Yes, I love that. You know, it's so funny because this is a house that was really not in the best of condition. And so we had to like really rebuild lots of parts of it. And that tree of life I found when I was in Jordan on one of my work trips. And it was just a circle. And then it's so funny, but the person who was helping us, you know, build the house, he just put it in. And he didn't tell me to put it in. But it's great. I love it. I came in one day and I was like, oh, that's great. So that's not even planned. That's just somebody who thought, I'm going to just stick that in there.
Well, it's a beautiful idea, and it looks very nice too.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
thank you all for your tree of life too.
Thank you.
And yeah, I wanted to rebound on something that when I researched you, which I thought was extremely interesting, was when you kind of finished college. So you told about law, your law degree, and also divinity school. You then kind of embarked on that journey to go to Cambodia and then creating IBJ, even though this was probably and most certainly the hard and maybe less glamorous path that you could choose, let's say, after college. And I think many people that are now at home kind of ask themselves questions on their own kind of motivations, on their own purpose. And I wanted to ask you, like, just what served as a motivation for you to start on that journey of becoming an agent of transformation in this world?
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's funny, but I think that I didn't actually realize how hard it would be. so I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, I think I thought it would be easier. I didn't realize it would be as difficult. In fact, when I first started International Bridges of Justice, I made a deal with, the universe. I said, listen, I don't really want to start an organization. That doesn't sound very interesting to me, but I know that it needs to be done. This needs to be done, so I'll do it. I said, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to do it for 1 year, and then I'm going to find someone to take it over. Well, you know what? After 1 year, there's no way that anybody would take it over because it had so many issues, so many problems, so many this and this and that, creating change. But it's like, there's funding, there's this and this and that. So I guess the first thing is that I didn't really realize that it would be as challenging as it was. But I might not also have realized that it'd be as much fun, because it's been challenging and it's also been really super fun. And I guess the thing for us all to realize is that, when you're doing something, sometimes we just think it's about the results, and I can be very results oriented myself. And what I had to sort of reset in terms of my own brain is that ultimately it really isn't. I'm sure you've heard this. Some famous person said this. I'm not sure who, but some famous person said, it's not just about the destination. It's really about the journey. And I think that for myself, once I, sort of came to terms with the fact that I wasn't, quote unquote, accomplishing everything that I needed to accomplish immediately, especially in the beginning, that it was also about my own journey, and that I could have a lot of gratitude about the fact that there was so much that was happening in my own inner journey as I was on the outside. The outside was sort of mirroring what was happening on the inside, and that I could just sort of be more at peace with that. So my motivation is that in the end, it's my calling. I'm sure everybody has their own calling, and it may not be a perfect journey, and yet it's the gift of each of our own particular journeys, whatever that may be. There is just something that's very blessed and very sacred about it, and we honor it in ourselves by just being able to be on it with gratitude.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So many kind of principles or values to remember, especially in these times now, especially also gratitude and kind of having contributing to this larger perspective around us. So very, very beautiful. I don't know, Stephanie, if you have another question.
Yes, maybe to rebound on that, as well, we are pretty young and just about to finish our bachelor's. What could we do, or what is your advice for young people or young agents of transformation? Agents of transformation, to start their own personal transformative journey. How do you really listen to your inner calling, or maybe notice the calling? Or
Yes.
What is your advice on that?
One is maybe practical and one is not that practical. One is, I think that writing makes a big difference. So just grab a journal anywhere and just write. I'd say just spend 15 minutes writing every day. Just write. And and don't let your hand come off the page until you finish writing, 2 pages or 1 page or something, and just write. Because I think that sometimes, believe it or not, our own heads get in the way of everything. And sometimes you're writing and just write, and your hand or your thoughts or something will give you some guidance. So that's the practical thing that I have. It's just to write. The second thing is, and this sounds extremely like a contradiction, but I had a friend once who said to me, you know what, don't worry about a thing. And that sounds ridiculous to say, don't worry about a thing. But in the end, I think we don't really understand everything in its current chapter. So I have another friend who's passed away, and he said once, you know what, you're in chapter 3, and then you're in chapter 5. And in chapter 5, you go, what the heck does chapter 5 have to do with anything? Nothing. And you feel frustrated because you don't see the pathway of your life. And then all of a sudden you come to chapter 7, and 3 and 5 come together. So that's sort of the same thing as to say, don't worry about a thing. Like, do what you can do, live a life with some gratitude, and somehow it's going to work out. Somehow 3 and 5 are going to come together in 7. And, your journey will nourish you if you allow it to, because it's exactly the right thing that you should do.
That is so true, but so difficult sometimes. I give it back to Mark.
Yeah, I think that we could definitely go on for hours talking about all of this. But to keep maybe the people's attention watching this video, and also to respect your time, I might want to conclude slowly the discussion with maybe one additional question that I kind of like to ask always at the end. And if it's basically, if there is a question or a topic that we didn't really fit into that discussion that you wished that we had asked you, or that you wish that we had touched upon, that you would want to share with people listening, is there something that we kind of missed that you want to talk about?
I don't think we missed anything. And I'm sure it's already on, it'll be there, but please check out International Bridges of Justice. That's at www.ibj.org. And, the organization, basically I founded the organization because every day in countries throughout the world, people are arbitrarily detained and tortured. And unfortunately, for many people in the world, torture is the cheapest form of investigation. So if they pick someone up and you cannot afford a lawyer, people are often tortured in order to get a confession, which usually is not even true, but you'll just confess if you're being tortured. So International Bridges of Justice has built a worldwide movement to end torture as an investigative tool by giving people a lawyer early on in police stations and courtrooms. And if you think that, check out our website. If you think there's something that you can do to contribute, let us know. And thank you. Thank you for everything. It's been wonderful to be with you during this short but nice period of time.